We ready? Okay, good deal. Thanks, Dennis. All right, just so everybody knows, for the agenda, what we've got, first is call to order, we have an invocation, and then we'll have approval of the agenda. Oh, you can't hear?
Well, they're out and about. Yes, we do.
I have 10.
Good.
They're around. They're distributed.
I'll be loud.
Here, do you want one? Do you need? You can have mine. I can share with Chris.
Yeah, we're good.
Here you go. Pass those out. I'll share.
All right, so we'll do we've done the invocation. I hope everybody heard it. Very beautiful words from Mr. Gamenden, as always, and I appreciate that. We'll do the approval of the agenda. The way we'll run the meeting is as soon as we get through the approval of the agendas, we're going to go through all the General Operations Committee agenda. They'll be completely done. Then when we get done with their agenda, we'll move on through budget, and at that point we'll get to recognition of the public and some other things. So that way we can get like we said before, it makes more sense to have presentations done before people comment, so that way they can comment on the most informed position. Everybody good on that part? All right. Moving forward now, we'll entertain a motion for approval of the joint agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Baker.
Need some more copies.
We are slim on copies, Mr. Hinton, so
Do you need a copy of both agendas?
She had a copy, she had enough copies for everybody
There's
on
not
the
a
committee.
joint agenda.
All right, we've got two.
I have 10.
Okay, here we go. We can hand this one.
yeah, we're good.
Is that
We just need to make sure we get it back this year.
Oh, it doesn't matter. Oh, no, that's not mine. She's using one. Okay, she needs one.
Jen Ops was
I
very
don't even.
thin.
Anybody need a Gen Ops?
Yeah.
She's the only one left. There you go. You should have.
Ben's gonna make you a copy.
How many copies do you want for up there?
Let's do about 5 then.
You'd be good.
Is it Gen Ops?
Yeah.
Here, he can have mine. I can share it with Mr. Dominion.
No, you don't have to. You've got,
Go
well,
ahead.
Mr. Rhodes has here.
Yeah, thanks, man.
No, she's eating grapes.
You sure? All right, thanks. I can take that straight. Mr. Graves, is that one?
Appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, we've got a motion and a second on the floor. Did you get them? It's
For the
Justin in the back.
agendas?
Yes, ma'am. Any discussion?
I got two budgets now.
Apparently somebody wants to make sure that you got that, Mr. Hinton. All right. Pending Ben quickly running to a copier and not passing out from the heat. But any more discussion? All right. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. I will now defer to Michelle.
All right, we will move along. Approval of the minutes. I'll wait for a motion. Motion made by Commissioner Kruger, seconded by Commissioner Reading. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, we will go straight to the report of the chairman, and my report is going to be a presentation from JPA. So, Mr. Thomas is going to come up, and he is going to have his team, Ms. Elizabeth and Mr. Cliff. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Can everyone hear me all right? Well, thank you for having us again. I apologize for my informality. I don't normally take my jacket off for something like this, but it is hot. So I apologize. We have made a lot of progress since the last time we met with you, and I wanted to bring you up to date on where we are, first of all. On the courthouse, we are at the end of what's called schematic design. We are entering the design development phase. At each step along the process, we've added to our team. We now have a construction manager who is helping us with cost estimating during the process, value engineering during the process, and then ultimately they will build the new building, the parking garage, and the jail pod, all three of which we'll be discussing a bit with you tonight. We're very pleased to have them. We did something a little different this time than we've done in the past. We had a problem with the cost estimate on another project. I didn't want to run into that again, so this time we selected two construction management firms, both of which were highly qualified, and we asked them if they would be willing to work with us during schematic design to give us competing estimates. We would then select, partly based on the cost estimate, partly based on their performance in a value engineering capacity. We selected Turner Construction and Bell Construction for that. Both did a phenomenal job. We were pleased with both of them. Both of them came in very close to our budget. Turner was right on our budget. Bell was just a little bit higher, but it's early. So we were confident that either of them could build the building for us. Turner also was very thorough, and we liked that. So we selected Turner Construction to move forward at the final decision of Ms. Shell and the recommendation of her entire team. They are now working with us, and in fact did an accelerated jail pod estimate for us just last week. We actually received that estimate on Thursday, and we're moving extremely quickly. Did value engineering with them that same day, and then prepared our budget on Friday on that basis. So everything happened very quickly last week. That's where we are today. I'm ready to show you some things about the projects, and then I'm ready to show you some budget numbers and some sort of phasing plans for the parking garage and the courthouse. And I'd like to start, Cliff, if we could, with a couple of images that I think you'll find interesting, if I can get them. The first one will be the site plan. And do you have a laser pointer that I can borrow here? I think you already had it prepared, and I just forgot to drop it. Okay, well, that's all right. If you look at the bottom of the screen, you see the courthouse in the right-hand corner of the screen. To the right, across the street there, is the church sanctuary. And then
Church sanctuary, parking garage.
thank you very much. With the library just north of the parking garage. The courthouse is going to look very much like what you see there as we look down. The plaza is probably going to be a little different. The plaza is not yet fully developed. There will be a little different plantings and bollards along Main Street there. It'll look a little different. The planting will be heavy that you see in the next rendering. The parking garage, this is very early innings. One of the things that we'll be asking you to approve tonight is funding to design the parking garage. What we are showing here is a preliminary sketch done by our design team sort of at no cost to us. But to do a full design for the parking garage and to decide exactly how many spaces we're going to get in that garage, we're going to need a full design process. So we've got a preliminary design for the parking garage. We've got a pretty polished schematic design for the courthouse. It may change a little bit, but not a great deal. And we'll be moving on from there. The next image I'd like you to look at is a professional artist rendering of what your courthouse would look like. Computer-aided imagery is phenomenal these days, and this is very much what the courthouse itself will look like. The vegetation and some of the plaza will evolve. That's not quite where we want it yet. But that's a pretty accurate representation of what it will look like, and you can see that it's set well back from Main Street. You can see that we have a good plaza over on the left side opposite the church sanctuary, so we won't be blocking their views of the stained glass windows as you drive down Main Street. We have a nice setback going on from the library. The library and the courthouse will become closer together as you move back beyond Main Street, but it all still works well. We'll have multiple entrances to that area back there. So we're hoping you'll be as excited about this as we are. We think our architects, ESA and S&W, have done an extremely good job on design for us. And you also see No Box Construction, that's our project manager. Randall is here with us tonight and has been with us for several months. We're putting together a very good team for you here. The next thing I'd like you to look at is the site plan for the jail. When we came up with our original strategic plan back in 2017, we had proposed getting some immediate relief for the jail. And we had proposed doing a single dormitory pod, relatively low security, which would be female housing, adult female housing. we needed to get some immediate relief. You're sleeping them 4 to a cell and people on the floor in the day room and that sort of thing. As time has passed, the overcrowding has become worse. And we decided to increase the requests that we're going to make to you and to increase what we were going to recommend to the Sheriff's Department in terms of phase 1. We'd like to try to build 2 pods now instead of 1. So the total capacity would go to a maximum of 128 bed spaces now in those 2 dormitory pods shown at the top of the drawing as phase 1. We're also doing sort of a diamond-shaped elevated control room which could serve up to 4 pods. So there could be a phase 2 in the future where you could get another 128 beds. So you could max out 256 dormitory-style, medium to low security housing in that footprint without impinging on the jail proper. Doing things to add on to the jail as a real addition would be very expensive. So we need this to be sort of a standalone facility, but we've given you some future flexibility and some future expansion that had not previously been envisioned in any of our planning. If we move to the final slide in this group, you'll see what those housing pods could look like. And the final decision on how the housing pods will be developed is still up in the air. That'll be the sheriff's decision. We could develop them as completely open dormitory housing as is shown on the right, or we could do it with partitions as is shown on the left. There are pros and cons to both, and we wanted to show both. But the good news is that the budget that we have now allotted for that has been vetted by our construction manager, so we feel that we can build it. A lot hinges on timing when we get to the phasing plan for this sort of thing. So I'll leave that part of it now, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the budget itself. And we're going to hand out a handout. I know that some of you like to look at a piece of paper, but knowing that we have people in the audience too, I wanted to have it up on a screen as well. So Cliff will capture that while Elizabeth hands out copies. Why don't you just give them a mass of copies at one time? This is our proposed phase 1 capital plan. Phase 2, for those of you who may remember the original strategic plan, involves what you do with the existing courthouse, and it involves what you do with the Criminal Justice Center after the courts move out. The juvenile court is going to kind of take care of itself because we've already agreed to do a swap with the church for that property. So we're going to demolish the probation building, and the church is going to convert the juvenile court building to their own ministries building. What's going to happen with the Criminal Justice Center is that once the courts move out of that first floor area nearest the main parking area, we'll move the Sheriff's Department into the space vacated by the courts, General Sessions and Criminal Court, and we will then move jail into what used to be the old jail, which the sheriff now occupies. So you're killing multiple birds with one stone here. The Sheriff's Department is extremely overcrowded. They scored about a 3, as I recall, on a score of 1 to 10, a scale of 1 to 10. So we'll be moving them into the court space. Once we've done that, the jail, which is also very overcrowded, could move into the vacated space by the Sheriff's Department. All that and the renovation of the historic courthouse will be phase 2. No money is being asked for at this time for phase 2. Frankly, I think we should give it a little more time to decide exactly how much we should ask for. I remember what we asked for during the strategic plan, but a lot of time is passing now. So we'll revisit that at some point, perhaps a year or 18 months in the future, as we see how the courthouse and jail pod is developing. So, to start at the top of that page, the new courthouse is still $78 million, and we're right on our budget. 5.7 million of that has already been approved. So we're asking for $72.7 million for the courthouse. The jail housing pod addition was originally $2 million for one pod to accommodate up to 64 inmates. We're now going to do 2 pods, plus we're building a 2-story control room, which will look down into up to 4 pods, plus we're sizing some things and fencing and other things to accommodate the 4 pods. So we're going to ask for $5 million now for the jail instead of $2 million. That's a total of 77.7 plus what's below the line. Below the line, we've got project management and construction management through the end of 2022. If things break right, we should be able to move into the courthouse at the very end of 2022. If they do not break right, you'd be looking at the first quarter of 2023. Ideally, we'd move in late December of 2022. That would be the best time to shut the courts down for that transition to the new facility. The transition space for juvenile court and county probation, you'll see the various costs related to that. You'll see the demolition of the county probation building. If you add all of those up, that's $1.3 million, including the $500,000 that you saw for project management and construction management. The parking garage, these are new numbers. You've not seen these numbers before. We like to build approximately 450 spaces. I'm going to call it 450 spaces right now. The actual design, which we do not have yet, will tell us whether it's 440 spaces or 430 spaces or 460 spaces or whatever. But it's going to be in the neighborhood of 450 spaces for a total budget of $9 million. We also need design fees, and that's shown as well, $450,000 for design fees. So you have to start with a number, 450 spaces. We're going to budget $20,000 a space. That's $9 million. Now you know what your design fees cost. Now you know what your total is, $9.45 million. So the new related project and expenses total would be 11.2 to add to the 77.7 that you saw earlier at the top of the page. We'd like to put an owner's contingency on the whole thing now. You've got a couple of new projects. We've got a bigger jail pod than we had. We've got a parking garage that we didn't have earlier. I'm recommending a $2 million owner's contingency. If we're lucky, we don't spend it. I mean, the good news is we're on budget for the courthouse and the jail pod. I'm pretty confident about the parking garage. I think we can hit all of our numbers. But if we can't, if there's something unexpected out there that we don't know about, or if there's some scope change that occurs in the next year or so, I'd like to have a contingency. So the total here is $91 million, and that's what we're asking you to approve tonight. That's just the first page, so if I may, I'll go on from there. If you're all right holding questions, we can come back to anything. I'd like to show you a schedule. And this one really is hard to decipher. So again, we're going to pass out copies of this. This, we're still going to call it hypothetical for the time being. We've vetted it the best way we can, but a lot of dominoes have to fall in the right way for this thing to work. We've got our CMAR. So you're seeing an RFQ for preparation and release, responses, select and negotiate contract. We just selected Turner. They've been on board for only a week. We'll be starting to talk about contract very soon with them, but we already know what their fees are because that was part of the process of selection. So all that we believe will go smoothly. We have to do the transition space as quickly as we can. That's another priority. So the next box you see is the GC for transition space. We need to hire a general contractor to do the juvenile court probation transition space. We have a design for it. It's a very fundamental design, very simple, and to demolish the probation building. We'd like to release that RFP this week, probably no later than Wednesday. It's already done, ready to go. And we hope to have somebody ready to be under contract by October 21st when you decide finally whether you will or will not move forward with these projects. So we won't try to sign a contract with the GC until the funds are approved for it. The next thing that we're trying to get done as quickly as we can is transition space for juvenile court and probation. So that will be the next thing we're trying to accomplish, that we've done the programming, we've found the location, we're into what will be the blue phase now pretty soon, where he's doing a design and then an accelerated upfit. The good news is we found what we believe is a very simple way to lay out a couple of courtrooms in that space. So we think that'll all go pretty quickly. Then the church needs to be doing some things, and they'll be working on their things as we demolish the probation building, as we move the juvenile court out of the property that we have swapped with the church and into our lease property. And hopefully all that then goes according to schedule as well, where we're able to get them out of the youth ministries building on the church site so that we can now demolish that building and do our site work. Moving down to the courthouse construction, we're in a design process in the blue colors. We've finished light blue. We're starting the medium blue, and we hope to be to the dark blue by early next year. Then we would do an early site package, and you could see that we'd like to demolish the youth ministries building and start work on the new courthouse in approximately October of 2020. And that's moving quite briskly. That's about the best we can do. Then if things go according to schedule from there, you're looking at a 22 to 24 month construction period with a move-in perhaps in December of 2022. That's our target. Here's what we won't do. We will not move the court into that building until the building is ready. I've seen that happen too many times and I don't like it. So if we need to, we'll delay the move-in until the building is really ready for them. If you move down to the next one, we've been asked to accelerate the design and construction of the parking garage. So our plan is to start design of the parking garage in November of this year, just as quickly as we have funding approved, and hopefully we'll be off and running then with the design and construction of the parking garage. It's probably about 9 months worth of design and 9 months worth of construction. So if all goes well, we'll have the parking garage open around mid-2021, which is about 18 months ahead of when the courthouse would open. The jail pod is the last thing that we're showing, and we actually are going to continue to advance the design on that. We have funding for design of the jail pod. We just don't have funding for construction of it. So again, assuming that everything breaks well, assuming that you decide to approve the budget in late October of this year, we would try to break ground as early as November. Now, whether we can mobilize our construction manager that quickly, whether we have the contract details sufficiently ironed out by that time that we could move them into that jail pod construction immediately, I can't say. We'll know more as we go forward. We just finished getting them ironed for the first part, the pre-con. That's the pre-construction part. Now we're going to ask them to accelerate their construction of a jail pod to get the jail pod open as quickly as we can. If everything went according to plan, and you know how often that happens, it's possible we could occupy the new jail pod by as early as July. But we're building a lot now. We're building 128 beds, not 64, and we're building an elevated control tower that can handle up to 4 separate pods if need be. So that's a more complicated building project now. We'll do our best. We'll try to hit July of 2020. So that's our schedule as it stands. Now, this is complicated. I don't expect you to be able to take it all in at a glance. I can't. I mean, I have to go through there line by line to look at it and to line up all the months and projects and what's going on. But I want to be very careful to give you good overviews of what we're doing and where we are on the project. And we can come back at any point and give you additional briefings, but this is basically where we are. I'd like to show you a little bit of a construction timeline which shows phasing, because I think in some ways this is easier to see than what you've been looking at up to this point. I'm going to skip over this first page. This first page is a repeat of what you saw in the schedule, just giving approximate construction schedules. But here's a good way to look at it. Here is your existing cluster of facilities. Criminal Justice Center on the bottom left, Historic Courthouse top left, Juvenile Courthouse and County Probation on the right, and then the new courthouse site with the parking garage right behind the library next to it. That's where we are today. Here's what we do next. This is an overlay of what the new courthouse would look like approximately, and where the parking garage would go. Again, details aren't important right now, but that's approximately our long-term target. Next, the first thing we have to do in order to make this work is to relocate the juvenile court and probation. Now, you've already bought that property and swapped with the church. That's yours. So what we have to do now is execute a lease and then do an upfit of the space to relocate the juvenile court and tear down the probation building. That'll be the first thing we do. Now, again, this is dealing only with the courthouse site. You've already seen what we're doing with respect to the jail property. The next thing we have to do is to demolish the probation building. Then the church is going to do what you see here. The two parking areas that are outlined in a single line drawing on the left are existing parking lots that the church owns and will make available to the construction team during the construction process on an as-needed basis, and will make available other parking as they expand it on an as-needed basis. Now, obviously, that parking won't be available Sunday mornings for construction. Obviously, there will be funerals and that sort of thing that will preempt parking. But the church have been excellent neighbors to the county on this, and their long-term plan is to extend their parking in a continuous way, where you see FBC expands parking lots in the middle. They're expanding in a continuous way down the street, and then they're going to do the same thing on the other side of Smith Street. And the parking that you see at the top of the drawing is right behind that juvenile building, which will now be youth ministries. Probation has to be torn down to make that possible. So they're going to do all that paving at once and all that grading at once, and we'll have some additional parking. Isn't it funny when it's hot and you're dry? Now, the purple represents built parking. The light blue represents what we're going to be doing. We've got to do several things simultaneously. The parking area on the bottom left of the drawing is a parking lot that was acquired from the church. That was a clever acquisition. You're going to use that. That's really going to become the laydown area for the construction of the courthouse and the parking garage. So we will grade the site, demolish the youth ministries building, and commence courthouse site work and commence garage site work all at the same time, using the laydown area shown at the corner of Water and Bledsoe. And this is something that Turner has already looked at, and our other construction management firm, Bell, had also examined this idea and said they think it'll work fine. So that's going to be happening in somewhere around October of 2020. We go to the next one. We've got a completed parking garage in about mid-year 2021. So it'll take about a year to get that finished. We're still using the laydown area now for the ongoing courthouse construction, which takes much more time than a parking garage. And there's the completed courthouse with its plaza and the completed parking garage approximately December 2022. To me, that is a much easier way to look at what we're doing than that Gantt diagram that we showed you, that schedule with phases. So that's roughly what we're trying to accomplish. Now, that's all I've got in terms of handouts, and that's all I've got in terms of slides. So I think I should probably stop at this point and just answer questions.
Thank you. That was a great presentation. I appreciate your thoroughness. So we are going to move to discussion part, and I will wait and see if there's a motion and a second to open up for discussion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, do you want to say what your motion would be for, to approve the project as
Just the
presented?
parking garage, so we're talking about, right?
The parking garage and the courthouse project, the project in its entirety.
The entire project in its entirety.
Okay, seconded by Commissioner Rhodes. All right, open for discussion now. So if there are any questions, then Mike and his team are happy to answer.
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure if I needed to wait for a motion.
Good. Commissioner Foster.
Mr. Thomas, you said that everything came together pretty rapidly last week,
Yes, sir.
and there's an additional $3 million for the jail pod. Have you had a chance to talk with the sheriff and see if that meets all of his requirements and get his buy-in on that?
Well, we hope
Design
so.
change?
We met this afternoon to talk about it. There was a conference call earlier today that we weren't a part of, but we were part of a 4:30 meeting to talk about it, and I believe they're very happy with it. It's the most that I feel that you can do. The $2 million pod that we recommended originally would only have given you modest relief. Their overcrowding has only increased in the last 2 years. So we went for as much as we could go for. I don't think that there is another solution out there that would be better than what we're proposing. Dormitory housing, 2 pods expandable to 4 at a cost of $5 million initially.
So they signed off on the special requirements for juveniles and females for the new pod?
Again, no, there will be no juveniles in that pod unless they put them in there. I can't make that recommendation to you. What I'm recommending is that this is medium to minimum security dormitory housing for up to 128 inmates. My idea of what you would do, if it's possible to do it, and I believe that TDI would approve it.
TCI.
TCI versus TDOC, there are a few acronyms here, would approve this, is to use pod 1A within the jail itself, which is a much higher security level than what we can do outside. There are 10 cells in pod 1A. There are currently 40 juvenile females in there. We would move those 40 juvenile females out of those 10 cells, and now you can separate your juveniles, who apparently are being rather violent, and put them in individual cells in pod 1A. Now here's the tickler. You need to have sight and sound separation. Well, you can fix the sight separation fairly easily. There are only a couple of spots where there might be a way to stand in the control room and be able to look from one pod to another, and you can use a mirror glass there. You can do a two-way glass to prevent somebody from looking through from the adult side to the juvenile side. That solves the sight issue. The sound issue is solved in a different way. I would do white noise generators. If somebody clanks on a wall or on a pipe or on a bunk, anywhere in a facility, you'll hear that. That's not the kind of sound separation that you're trying to get at. That's not what the American Correction Association had in mind with its original standards, or what TCI has in mind by sound separation. If somebody yells loud enough, you'll hear a voice. You'll hear a sound. If somebody screams, you'll hear that sound. The separation that they were trying to avoid is ability to hear words in an identifiable way. White noise generators will prevent that. So that is the way that I would deal with sight and sound separation for pod 1A. Now my understanding is TCI is going to do a walkthrough in the middle of next week. I hope they'll do several walkthroughs over the months that come and we keep advancing this from a problem-solving standpoint. Because it is my professional recommendation that we not try to solve too many things simultaneously with those dormitory pods. If the sheriff chooses to operate one of those pods as a juvenile pod, that is his operational decision, and we have nothing to do with that. I don't mean that in a negative way. I simply mean that's in his hands and not our hands. He'll change the operation of his jail many times over the next 10 or 15 years anyway. But what I'm going to recommend is that we build 128 dormitory pods, take the pressure off the main facility, and then find a pod that you can put juveniles in a secure way and deal with the sight and sound separation cleverly. So that's the best we've got at the moment.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Foster?
Yeah, so to be clear, the sheriff didn't request the additional pods, you just thought it'd be more cost-effective to go ahead and
Well, it's
add the
partly
spaces?
that. They were actually requesting additional pods, but the original request was, in addition to solving the adult female problem, we also put a juvenile male pod and a juvenile female pod out there. And there was a meeting, I guess about 2 weeks ago, where it became clear we were just going in circles, that we could not solve all these problems. And at that point, we decided to make a very clear recommendation to our client that the best solution that we can come up with, the one that is most consistent with the strategic plan that everybody agreed to 2 years ago, is that we do low security, dormitory housing pods, low cost. You know, the $5 million is still a very affordable cost for 128 beds. That's very good. You can expand by another 128 beds for a total of 256, which increases your total jail capacity by more than 25%. So this is our recommendation to the sheriff, to the commission, who is our client, to Sumner County. I believe that they will find this to be a very good solution, but it's a new solution for all of us, because we just came up with this solution last week. And we had to, because we were going in circles.
As a point of clarification, just to give a little bit of background on that, Mr. Foster, is we met with the Sheriff's Department and our architects and TCI 2 weeks ago. As we all know, with the population that comes through that jail, it's constantly evolving. We may, you know, it might be high on males, it might be high on females. Now we've got a juvenile trend going, so it's constantly rotating as to, you know, what the demand is and how to do that. So by changing it from the one original pod and doing the two larger pods, we gain a lot more bed space to take the pressure off of the enclosed spots in the jail, where we can utilize those for more of our juvenile and keep those, because right now TCI allows us to house 4 juveniles per cell, but it's hard to manage that. And so if we can, you know, open up both pods and pull some of those adults, then we free up some spots there, and it allows for more flexibility in the future with the pods. If we have a surge in male population, that we can easily take one of those pods and make it a male pod. Or if we have a surge of females, we can, you know, make them both females. It just gives us a lot more flex space in the future as to not boxing us in with the big pods to get the most bang for our buck, for lack of better
And
words.
one of the objections, frankly, to our single pod scheme of 64 was that they're already housing 40 females in pod 1A. And they were saying, well, gosh, if we move out our 40 females from pod 1A to make room for juveniles, we only gain 24 bed spaces. Our net is only 24 bed spaces, and it's a legitimate argument. So we decided we needed to double what we were going to try to shoot for and give them 128 initially, with the capability to expand long-term to 256. Now it makes more sense to use a pod 1A and to give up some of that capacity in order to have a higher security level for those juveniles who are frankly not easy to manage.
There's also the idea too that if at some point we have to, the sheriff can come back and say, hey, look, the pod's working this way or that way for the minimum, but we need more of a higher security than what we have. So it may be that we have to honestly come up with more money for them to make adjustments as they retrofit some of the old jail space they'll be leaving, or turn around when we look at the other 2 pods that are options, or have to redo part of what they've got right now. So the idea is to try and, Aaron said it best one time, he goes, it's constantly flowing, so I've just got to figure out which way to push the flow so that we get the most space. Like if they pull the trustees out, put them in more of a minimum security area, like a pod, that frees up the more secure area that they're in right now that they don't have to be in. But we might have to turn around and spend some money to upgrade that from, say, the medium security where the trustees are at to something higher so they can individually house these juveniles. Because the juveniles right now, this week, is the worst issue because they're just terrible together. So they're really wanting to put them in more isolated, and so that might mean more money. And it may be, we've got the $2 million for owners, the owners' contingencies, that kind of thing. And we might also look at it, and if the sheriff comes to us and say a year from now and says, you know what, we've had a boom because of meth, who knows what, but we're really having a problem dealing with, this particular class, and we're going to have to change part of the jail. I think that's just something as a commission we all need to understand. When this comes up, it's not something we can kind of ignore, mainly so he doesn't sue us, but also, but really because it's going to change, but he'll have a little bit of forewarning about it, so we'll be able to at least start planning for it. So that's the thing, but we just need to know that this is not set in stone, and it can't be set in stone because we don't know how the jail population is going to be. We can't lock them into something like that. Is that okay, Aaron? Okay.
Okay, Commissioner Good.
Madam Chair, just for a blank, thank you for that. Technical agenda, but it's a joint meeting. And to echo Commissioner Taylor, but for Mr. Foster and others, as a reminder, just a blanket of added comfort, we've been meeting going on 2 years, a little bit over 2 years, I think, collectively since day one. And the sheriff, Aaron, and his team, which are here tonight, have been there all along. So, and they've been in meetings before the TCI ARC meeting last week, and I'm sure they would speak up if we were saying something that wasn't 100% accurate, which is to get them relief as fast as possible.
This was something that I think really needs to be understood clearly. We weren't even asked to look at the jail in that way. We were asked to look at the jail site as a possible site for a new courthouse. I took it upon my own behest, with no additional increase in fee, to do a jail study. We did forecasting, we gave the jail a score, we identified the hot areas, and I made the recommendation that we give the jail some immediate relief. It was immediate short-term relief, and that is exactly what I told you every time we ever met. To do something between 48 and 64 beds as a dormitory housing type solution for approximately $2 million. Well, the needs have increased. We tried to be responsive to that, but we found that we were just trying to solve too many problems simultaneously, and that was never the intent of those pods. The pod was always intended to be a dormitory type, fairly low security housing pod. So we went back to the original plan, which was my original recommendation to this county back in 2017, and I doubled it. And in doubling it, I also did a control room, which is a 2-story control room that can surveil 4 pods simultaneously if need be, which saves you millions of dollars in staffing over a period of time. So it was the absolute best that we can do for the money that we think is reasonable to spend, and it is our recommendation to you.
Get your question? Okay, you're in the queue. Sorry, there's a couple ahead of you. Commissioner Hinton.
Couple of 3 things. It's always been my understanding that juveniles are going to be handled out of town. There's no law.
I'll clarify.
And let me explain the difference in that. Juveniles, yes, these are juveniles that have been sentenced to adult jail, but because they are still under the age of 18, they are a separate category unto themselves.
So we have to keep them, we don't
Yes,
have
sir.
a deal.
We have to keep
Ship them out of town. Work on that, Dick.
I'll just go to my miracle tree and work something up, Mr. Hinton.
Okay, so we've got we've got a category or a group of people that need high security that this is the first time I'm hearing about it. Now, maybe it's sitting in a room and I flipped the switch, I don't know, but I was under it because juveniles would come up 2 or 3 times and somebody would say, well, we need to accommodate juveniles, and everybody said, no, we already set up to take care of that. And in that context, juvenile without the stipulation, they're still not being maintained in Sumner County.
That is correct. There's basically juveniles that are tried as juveniles, and we outsource those typically to Rutherford County. And then we have juveniles tried as adults. We have male and female that have to be kept separate. So, and then you have your adult male and your adult female as well. So within our jail, we have 4 sections in those different areas that we're working with. So what we're talking about now is making room for are the juveniles that are tried as adults that we have to
Young
house.
adults, if we could make a difference, juveniles leave town, young adults may stay. Whatever.
I think the distinction is these are juveniles who are alleged to have committed felony, which automatically applies.
Committed adult.
Which there has been an increase of lately, which is why we're even having this discussion. It's a constant revolving wheel of what the hot spot is. And right now, that happens to be it, Mr. Hinton. Who knows in 3 years what it'll be? But right now, today, that's where we're at.
I got another.
Yes, sir.
Question. We've doubled the jail facility, basically. The design fee, the design fee is settled.
Yes, sir.
It's 5%. It's 5%, whatever.
The design fee is what they agreed to originally, whether it's 2 pods or 1 pod, that doesn't make any difference.
And that's true for this entire project from the
Yes,
first
sir.
concrete block to the last sphere.
Yes, sir. No increase.
Okay. So
The only increase is the $450 for the design of the parking garage, which was not envisioned in
not
their
part
original
of the
budget.
original.
We locked those in, Mr. Hinton.
Is it still 5% for the parking garage?
The parking garage is exactly 5%, yes, sir.
Okay.
9 million times 5 is 450,000.
Do you think that you could provide this body a much more detailed flow for the Gallatin Library of Sumner County than what we have before us?
Once we get to the design process, I think is what he's asking is how the traffic will flow for the drop off of the library.
Oh,
Yes, we
sure.
can get that, but not until we get that design.
Okay, but.
Yeah, we've got to
Of the
work on
parking
that plaza some more, but we have about a 20-foot distance between the courthouse wall and the edge of the library. We do envision being able to continue to have traffic come through there if we want.
Our project manager has met with the library, and we're going to continue. Again, we want to be a good neighbor. We are working closely with the library to make sure that that traffic flow is.
And that's just right lately happened. Nobody had talked to the librarian until within the last 30 days. And I've talked to her. She feels some better having had discussions with him.
Well, this is one of those, again, where we weren't really allowed to do too much on the parking garage, so we couldn't.
That's true. That's
I
true.
mean, sometimes you have to move fast once you get permission to do something.
But the building itself, excluding the parking garage, from this distance away, there's a thin blue line between the
But that
library
thin blue
and the
line
jail.
is
Or
20
the library
feet.
and the courthouse.
If
That's
we go
all I
back,
can see.
let's go back to our site
And that
plan.
don't need to be a thin blue line, that needs to be a traffic flow.
Oh, I'll show you. We'll go back to our site plan.
Roughly 20 feet.
Yeah, we got about 20 feet in there, Mr. Hinton. We're
I mean,
working really
a
closely with the
vehicle's
library.
only 6 feet wide, so
Uh,
you'll see in the site plan there, we've got a pretty good distance here separating and they're only close together for a very small distance. Most of the time, we've got the plaza next to the library anyway. But yes, there is a lane there, and our only issue is we have pedestrian traffic coming through from the garage to the entrance to the courtroom, which is on Main Street. So we got to separate that. And how much flow we're going to allow through there, I just couldn't say right now.
Well, there's book drops that people come in their car.
Right.
They don't have to get out in the snow and rain, they're opening it down now.
But we may
Book
do
drops.
that from Smith Street. We could very easily do book drops from Smith Street and then just circle around the parking garage and come back out on Smith Street rather than penetrating from Main Street. Because I am a little bit worried about our pedestrian movement from the garage to the courthouse with cars driving by them.
Sure.
That's a little scary.
Yeah.
Because you're gonna have a lot of people at certain times of the day walking back and forth from the garage to the.
Yeah, and the traffic for the two units are entirely different. We were hauling convicts from the jail up one lane, and we're hauling grandma with her grandkids up the other.
Well, the convicts are coming in the back. If I had a pointer, I could show you that at the bottom right of that drawing, that little appendage that you see sticking out,
To the right
that's a
there.
garage.
Right.
And the inmates go in there into basement area of the courthouse. They don't mingle with anybody.
That was my next question.
Yes.
The vehicle will pull into a secure area and unload.
Underground.
Right.
That's literally a
Underground.
garage that is external to the building, and then they'll go into an area that is basement from this side, it's ground floor. Remember, there's a side slope of about 20 feet there. So from this side, that's the ground floor, and that's why we can do an external garage. From the front door, that's basement.
Okay. So the probability of Granny with her grandkids seeing convicts unloading is
Zero.
None.
That's an answer that needed to be said publicly.
Yes.
Because I've been asked that.
Good question.
Is people gonna wanna bring their kids over there and let them out to the library and see convicts unloaded?
No, and they're on the opposite side of the site, and you've got all that central energy plant between them and the van. So even if there were a bus or a van that pulled in, you couldn't really see it from the parking
Okay.
garage.
And there needs to be somewhere in this, there needs to be discussion about reserved parking for the library. Of course,
Yes.
we don't own that to the west side of the library.
That's right.
That belongs to the people down there.
And that still has to be negotiated with somebody, but again, we had to have certain dominoes fall before we could even show drawings and that sort of thing.
Okay, I'm done for now.
And Mr. Hinton, once we can get design process moving forward on the parking garage, that is very much an aspect of it. It's working with the library, working with those business owners, because again, we want to be a good neighbor. This is a legacy project that's going to be here for hundreds of years to come. We don't want to do it wrong, which is why we've been talking about it for over 2 years now. We want to make sure that we get it done right. And it's a project that when we stand back from, we don't have the library mad or this person mad. Everybody is happy with the final project. And so I can assure you, we will be working very closely with the library to make sure that their needs are met as well as everyone else's needs.
I think people are actually going to be surprised at the volume of traffic that comes to that.
Right.
Your mouth will kind of drop off of that through the library over there, how many people pass through there. But a lot of the programs that they run is on weekends, so we won't be having to
All right.
go.
Commissioner Becker and then Commissioner Taylor.
Mr. Bowles.
All right, I have a few questions. Trying to think, I'm gonna ask about the parking garage first, but anyway, I'll just go through, no particular order of these questions. What was the original timing on the jail pod? Again, I know that, see this timeline, but I'm trying to, with our recent overall budget, we increased the property tax rate to account for an earlier jail pod construction than was originally thought. So does this reflect the additional money we just raised taxes for?
Well, it does, but I don't
Yes.
think it affects the schedule. I think that we still need your approval of the budget for $5 million.
Mr. Thomas, too quick.
I'm sorry.
You know, you're understanding a different question what Jerry's asking.
Okay.
So, yes, that is reflected in it, Jerry. It's been moved up quite a bit as far as when we were planning on doing everything because the money, and David and Mr. Thomas have already been working about that, so that way he could adjust their schedule. Like when you look at on the bar graph one, if you look for like the parking garage, perfect example. Now the parking garage is on there for this year. So we're starting to do the sketches and things. Then you see the construction of it after that. It finishes like 18 months before the tentative end date of the courthouse. So it's done almost 2 years before the courthouse is done. Those are all those changes for what we added the 4 pennies for are reflected on his timelines now. That's all been updated.
Yeah, so I was just curious, what was, for the jail pod specifically, what?
Well, again, there are two separate questions there. And I was answering the second question, where he's answering the first question. You have now got a tax increase, or call it what you will. You have funding capacity to be able to handle these projects. But I still couldn't ask you for the money until we asked for the money. So we were going to ask for the money now, and we were going to still be on about that same design and construction schedule that you're seeing there.
Yeah.
It was always going to
I
be.
understand that. I don't think you're understanding my question.
I guess I'm not.
What about the finance director?
They have a time schedule without the additional property taxes, which not realistically, because when you look at the amendments that you'll need tonight to do the jail pod, the garage, and demolition together, it comes from 4 cents, meaning half being moved, and the rest of it. It's about 4 cents you can push a large project, which was the jail pod at least a year and a half.
I was trusting you to come up with the money, but I was always planning to do the jail pod as aggressively as it was physically possible to do.
We've said that's been the plan all along, is to give them some immediate relief. Like Mr. Thomas said in his presentation, we wanted to give the jail some immediate relief. What that immediate relief looks like has moved a little bit. It's shifted from 1 dormitory housing to 1 pod
on the
with.
old timeline, Jerry, they didn't get money for a jail pod until, if we have the bar graph, you saw, and you see it's like 2019 is where you see the different things for plans. The stuff for the jail pod didn't come in until, if I remember right, 2021. So it was tied in with the courthouse, but it wasn't going to be done until we issued the overall bonds for everything, and all we were going to do was just plans for it. So it's moved up a year and a half, which is the most we can move it up and realistically get it done.
Thank you.
Is that okay?
Related just to the jail pod, just in general, and please don't take this as criticism, because I know forecasting, if people can forecast correctly, we move to Vegas or whatever, and win a lot of money. But it does concern me that we're having started the project and we already are doubling the space that was forecasted for. So, like, just in this one area, we're now doubling that because the forecasted numbers were.
Well, it's been 2 years also.
Well,
And again, Mr. Becker, if you remember what Mr. Thomas just said is, and their original scope was not even to forecast the jail. So no.
No, it wasn't a forecast.
It was not a forecast for the jail. It was a forecast for population versus how much traffic's going through our court. There was never a specific.
We actually did do some forecasting.
Right,
What
but
I'm saying
not-
is-
Yeah, you just said a few minutes ago. that you
We
didn't
did,
forecast.
but you missed something else that I said.
Okay.
We did not base that single pod on our forecasts. That had nothing to do with our forecasts. We did forecasts, and we came up with a plan. Let's move the courts out of your criminal justice center. And as we do that, we'll expand the sheriff, who is overcrowded, into their area where the courts were. That will allow you to enlarge your jail capacity on site, right there. You're physically connected to that space. That was our plan. It didn't look like enough to me. So I said, I think we should try to give the jail some immediate relief for female housing. It's the adult female housing that is so overcrowded. And I remember talking to you about people sleeping on the floor. It bothered me just as much as it bothered you. And that's where we came up with a plan to do a single pod, which is what I thought maybe I could sell to the county. I'll try to convince you to build a single dormitory pod of somewhere between 48 and 64 beds, and I'll cap it. I'll say it'll cost $2 million to do that. I had no basis for that because I couldn't get a basis for it. You go out and you try to talk to the modular construction companies. They won't talk to you until you have a design. They won't even talk to you. They won't give you a budget number. They won't tell you what anything costs. So I used my experience as a consultant doing this kind of planning, and I said, I think we can build 48 to 64 beds for $2 million. And that is exactly what I told everybody in all the planning meetings, in all the advisory panel meetings, and before the commission. So this isn't so much that we did a forecast and the forecast was wrong. We tried to open the valve and give you some relief. Let the steam out a little bit. Well, we've gotten to a certain point. The sheriff has been telling us that that's not really going to help them as much as we thought, because if we move 40 females out of 1A, they only gain 24 beds. That is a drop in the bucket. Well, that's a legitimate point. We took that under advisement. And we said, okay, we'll double it. We'll give you 128 beds. Now, that'll raise the cost. But now I've got verified costs. We've had Turner Construction look at our design and say, we can do that. So it's not a question of forecasting going wrong. I'll tell you the truth, you can't forecast jails accurately. You cannot. If you build it, they will come. I'm serious about that. Things happen in your jurisdiction. This is a supply-driven business. The courts are a demand-driven business. You have X number of cases out there, you have X number of judges, you need X number of courtrooms, you need X number of clerk of court people, you need X number of DAs. There are always more people that you could incarcerate at any given moment in time than you have bed space capacity to accommodate. So you pick what you can afford, and you say, I'm going to build this much. We know we're going to fill it up. We know we are, but I'm going to build this. And it's the best consultant recommendation I can give you is that we do double this.
Okay, thanks, sir. Phase 2, I know this, we don't have that here, but what was the price tag on the initial phase 2?
Have you got that with you? I'd have to look back at our strategic plan for that. Approximately $18 million plus some contingency.
So 18 million, so if you
Plus
add
the
18 to
contingency.
this 91, so that's a total of 109.
Well, again, I don't know that it will be 18 million. I think it was 18 million plus at least $2 million in contingency, so I'd round it to 20 at the minimum.
I was just curious what it actually was.
Well, but we had some contingency.
I think the parking garage was in phase 2 originally too, wasn't it?
No, ma'am.
No, was it?
We were specifically asked not to try to.
Yeah, the parking lot was a little bit made of phase. It was a different one.
I mean, we did about a $3.5 million contingency on the whole project, and we've used a little bit of it for this project, so I'd round it to 20 million. I mean, maybe it's 19 and a half, but I don't know if it's worth slicing it that thin.
Well, I was just curious about, what you presented to us.
Okay,
So,
it was 18,172,200 plus a portion of our $3.5 million overall project contingency. So I'm going to call it $20 million.
Okay.
But here's the number.
So the total, so the total of phase 1 and phase 2 at the bottom of that sheet was 102?
Yes, at the time it
So now
was.
we're looking at 102 plus, or excuse me, let's just say $20 million, so you get looking at 111 million. So it's 9, so basically we're looking at the parking garage.
Yeah, and the parking garage is right at 10 million of that. And then we've had some more escalation that I had to account for. I added about a year of escalation to the courthouse when we had some delay between 2017 and the decisions in 2018.
Okay. I know this isn't for you, but the parking garage, 9.45, how much is Gallatin's portion going to be of that?
Gallatin has agreed verbally to partner with us on the garage. That is all they've committed to right now until we agree verbally that we are going to build the garage. And then once both have agreed, then we can get together and figure out exactly who's gonna pay for what parts and portions. Does that make sense? We can't
They
really.
passed a resolution saying as soon as y'all do it and you actually have some numbers, we'll be glad to kick in. JPA is gonna kind of represent us in that negotiation of what they pay. It's gonna be based on their from my understanding, it'll be based on their access to the parking garage. How much access they want is how much they're gonna pay. And then when that number, whatever the number is, they're gonna issue a bond then, turn around and give us the money, and David's gonna take that money and we're gonna apply it to the bond we have for this. Or when we do have a bond.
And Madam Chair, it's worth mentioning, because I've heard a few people talk about the garage being moved up. Gallatin has kind of dictated that, for those that have not heard that, respectfully dictated it, is that they, to partner with us, they want it to be moved up to where it is, and that's the situation we're in, which may cut the cost in half.
That's correct. Mr. Becker, does that finish your questions?
No, not yet. Thank you. I think, if I understood, my next question was about the library parking during this, and I think one of your slides showed that. Is that what this data, like this
Right.
purple area?
Right.
Okay, cool. And this is just for my education. One of those said, what is a lay down area? I'm not familiar with that term.
Well, you've got big precast panels and steel beams and stuff like that. They're delivered before they're needed so that you can use them when you need them. And you've got to have an area that you can put them in that's nearby.
Yeah, no, I just wanted the definition. I appreciate it. That's all. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to just ask, as we're trying to do a joint committee, we have budget that still has a full agenda, is that we try to limit as many comments and do questions, and that way we can get through the agenda and budget can get through their agenda. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So if we can ask questions, we can stay here all night, ask questions, get those answered if those need to be, but let's try to keep comments as low as can and focus high on the questions. Commissioner Taylor and then Mr. I don't care who goes. One of you jump in.
One of three particular questions that come to mind that I've been asked since this was presented and approved at the last approval we got. Between the library and the courthouse, or the proposed courthouse, we talked about coming back that street, bringing in the convicts, or the, whatever proper word you want to use. So what the question the constituents might have, and
Mr. Taylor, the convicts are not coming through the library.
No, they're coming in the back behind.
Okay.
And into the courthouse.
I thought you said through that.
No.
Okay, yes.
What their concern is, it looks like there's a little courtyard there between the proposed courthouse and the library.
Are you talking about on the back?
No, on the front.
Oh, yes.
No
Yes,
prisoners are coming.
There's a closet there.
That's not, I'm getting to my question, if you'll let me finish. The concern is, the ones that hadn't been convicted yet, they're coming in the front door.
Yes, sir.
So they're gonna be hanging out right next to our library.
They may. I wouldn't think they would. Why would they hang out? I mean, you come to courthouse, you don't want to hang out.
They do it now at the
It's
courthouse.
1,000 times worse than that.
Yeah. So that was just a concern that
It's,
I said I would pose
I
for this.
appreciate that.
That's what I'm posing.
Okay.
What did you call the tax increase? You called it something.
I said whatever you want to call it. I mean, you're coming up
Pretty
with.
good. I've never heard it called that, what you called it. That's the reason I wanted to ask that, but. So the total new money that you're presenting before us tonight is $11,252,470. That's from one of your first recent slides.
Well, it's actually a little more than that. We've increased the jail housing pod from 2 million to 5 million. And then,
Well, that's what it says here. It says new related projects.
well, it is new projects.
Yeah.
So the jail pod is an old project, it's just bigger now.
So the total is 11.
Plus 3 million for the jail pod because we've
So
done.
why would you put that in the new related projects?
Because it's not a new project.
Well, it's related.
it's an old project.
That's
These are
related.
new projects. These projects were not envisioned in the strategic plan. I didn't know whether we'd need transition space back when we were doing the transition plan. I didn't know that we were going to demolish the county probation building. I didn't know about the parking garage. I knew we needed one, but I didn't know how big, I didn't know how much it was going to cost. So these are new related projects. They're related to the courthouse, but they're new. These are original Phase 1 projects. One of them got bigger.
Okay. I have a question for the finance director, if I might. So the new, whatever they're called, the new total cost to open the building, all the shiny things that come with it, that's basically increased 10%. And since our tax increase, since then,
No, I'll answer it for you, Mr. Taylor. What you're saying, is that a 10% increase in the overall project? No. The parking garage wasn't included. So that's something that the libraries have said, Gallatin has said, other people have said we need to get done sooner rather than later. So
to me,
the tax increase,
it was
you asked a
part
question, sir, and I'm answering it. I'm showing you the same respect you show me, okay? The reason that wasn't, so if you want to say it's a 10% increase, it's semantic, say whatever you need to, but we are moving the parking garage way up, and that's where the 4 cents came in. It really needs to be more than 4 cents, but we're making it work. So, but yes, if you want to say the overall project, yeah. In fact, if you throw Phase 2 in there, that's another 20 million, so you could say it's 20%. It's however you want to look at it.
Well,
it's how you grease the pig, I mean, basically, that's how.
That's, I know, that's what
I'll be
I,
respectful.
and that's why I answered the best way I could, buddy.
And I'm, you know, I disagree.
Again, I'll jump in here. There's a lot of moving parts to this, Mr. Taylor, and we've said that from the very beginning of trying to utilize the space that the juvenile court was in. We wanted to try to hold on to that space and not have to do transition space. As we got into negotiating with the church, that was something they were pretty adamant on. They wanted to lock in their construction fees in order to upfit it. So there have been a lot of moving parts to this project, which we have made very clear from the very beginning. There are a lot of different people involved in it, and we're constantly, forecasting and changing and trying to do it. But the base, unless the scope has changed, is pretty much the same. He's just said that, we changed the scope on the jail, it has increased. We've changed the scope with the new projects, with the transition space, so that has changed. So the base scope is still the same as the base. It's just what we've added to try to catch up with the moving parts as what's been added on.
Well, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but this is my MO here, is to just be as forthright with you as I can. You were always going to need a parking garage. I've always told you that you can't build a new courthouse and consolidate all your facilities without having a parking garage.
Do you think we could open it without?
I didn't say we didn't need a parking garage.
But we really couldn't talk about it much and talk about cost much until you had a chance to sort of feel out the city and see if they might be willing to partner with you. And we certainly couldn't talk about it until you had a site identified, and we could then identify where you'd put a parking garage. So, yeah, the parking garage is a new cost, but it's not like you weren't always going to need one.
It was done before. I knew the garage. Last year, when I was campaigning, knocking on doors, that people asked me what to expect, I said, expect a tax increase from the courthouse. That was
Questions?
last summer. So, that's all I gotta say.
Thank you. Questions? Mr. Holt, do you have a question?
No.
Okay.
I'll probably agree.
We have a tight agenda. We're pushing on to Chris's agenda, so.
Let me say this. I think JPA did a great job. The courthouse, they spent hours and hours and hours. We did a good job with acquiring property, no hurt feelings. It's going to be a benefit to First Baptist and the citizens downtown. They did a good job with our judges to involve them because they're major partners. Done a great job being open and transparent commission to let them know what the cost is going to be. I think it's vitally important that we step up and we fund this tonight. I'm going to tell you why. The jail is really an issue right now. We have the capacity for 832. The weekend, we had 915. We were 83 people over capacity. The math on that is 10% over capacity. In addition to that, if you build a pod, and I'm going to say this, the EA has not had time to totally vet that issue, because how long have you worked on that? 2 weeks?
Since that meeting where everybody went to pieces, yeah.
2 weeks. So we need the sheriff's office involved, and they're going to be involved. We're going to work out the details. But if you build that, and it's current proposed state, that's 128 more beds. Now, we're 83 over capacity right now. That only leaves, if we had to go tomorrow, 45 open beds that we could easily fill over the weekend that didn't turn out so well. So I'm telling you, it's vitally important that we fund that additional $3 million for that. And as far as the parking garage, we're going to need it. And the city of Gallatin, because it's not definitive yet, they've said they're going to partner. Plus, we haven't even spoke with, 3 property owners that we've still got to work out an agreement with, which I think that is something we can easily do. Because working with First Baptist was a real challenge. Not that they were tough to deal with, there was a lot involved, right? So, any foundation of moving forward is based on funding. And if we don't have the funding, it's hard to really negotiate with these people. The Gallatin, the property owners, are working out with the sheriff's office exactly what the addition to jails would be. So I'm just telling you, we can talk it to death, but I strongly encourage you to fund this, because this is the foundation of exactly what you're doing in downtown. And to really, you're addressing the major concerns first. And, I mean, we can second guess it all night long, but it's so important that we fund this, especially that jail addition. And to some extent, the parking garage. You gotta have a place to park. That's all I gotta say.
All right. Seeing no more, oh, yes, sir, Mr. Hinton.
Well, which committee are we working on right now?
General Ops.
General Office.
Let me ask the chairman of finance. We earmarked $2.5 million a year approximately for this project. Will the $2.5 million a year make the payments on the jail, by doubling the pod at the jail, $2.5 million will make the payments on that expansion?
Actually, what we're doing, Mr. Hinton, is with the 4 pennies that we got and additional money we're pulling out of debt services, we were going to pay for it outright for this year, what we could pay for. So it's the $450,000 for the design plans for the parking garage is going to be paid for outright. The $557,000 for the transition for juvenile court was going to be paid for outright. The $125,000 or $150,000 for demolition was going to be paid for outright. And the beginning parts of the jail pod, depending on how much it gets done, is going to be paid for outright. Because what we have to do is we have to have the way David's explained it, and correct me if I'm wrong, David, we have to have the money in hand first before we sign the contracts for these. We're not going to issue a bond this year right now for our, say, $12 million, because it's going to cost us more to turn around and do that, and then another bond next year for the overall project. So we're able to cobble up money because of those 4 pennies to pay for all of this year to get us through to July 1st. And then July 1st, because we'll be set, we can look at it and issue a bond then for what's left of the project and what we want to do.
What size bond would $2.5 million make a payment on?
2.5 is on maybe, on what's already in the code, plus 2.5 is sufficient. So if we could have waited another year and a half to issue the bond, but the 2.5 cents moving next year, 4 cents next year moving it over the next summer for the land issue.
And that is about $2.5 million.
2 4
Oh, okay.
Yes, sir.
So we raised taxes 4 cents. We justified doing that for the jail property.
Yes, sir.
And now we find that the 2.5 cents actually won't pay for the jail.
Probably not. it would pay for the one pod. One pod's not gonna cut it for the sheriff right now. They really need two, based on how bad things have gotten in the 2 years since.
And it saves
And-
millions to do it now.
And if we can pay for it outright by pulling the money from some other spots, that we can do it this year. So we've got enough that we're okay to take care of it this year, and it needs to be done this year. So,
You actually be.
But yeah.
It's 5.5 cents is no this, and 3, well, it's 5 million, yes. So the jail pod, the contingency supposed to be 925, generation, the remodel is 5,775.
Transition.
and originally we had actually put in for more money for the jail. It had been, I think, 4.5 or 5 cents, I can't remember which. We tried, and that's because David's good at what he does. He figured out some other places we could pull money for one time to pay for it this year, so we could pay for it outright. That was the whole goal.
I can say for a surety that in its entirety, the 4 cents is gonna go into the.
Oh, yes, sir.
jail project.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Plus money that we.
Yes, sir. It's not, 4 cents is not enough, but it's all going there. So, yes, sir. You're very comfortable saying that.
To issue your bond for this project next year, you're going to need to move the 4 cents to debt service back to capital, and you're gonna need to move the 50.5. But this year, you moved it over into capital because it will allow you to do it cash, because it's much cheaper to do it on cash and issue $1 million later. Because if you hold that bond, your arbitrage issues, you issue multiple bonds.
Mr. Henn, to answer your question, if somebody were to ask you, is that 4 cent raise going to the jail? Absolutely all of it is, sir. And it's not enough.
And we need to be able to answer.
And that's, I know,
Absolutely.
and that's the question you have, and also follow up with, that's not enough money, but we're making it work.
And if we approve the parking garage, it'll also go, all of that will go to that.
Yes, sir.
That's where that money's going.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
And even the increase that we had other money somewhere that we could transfer to make this all work. The 4 cents wasn't adequate
No,
to
sir.
do the project that we're discussing whether or not we're going to undertake.
Yes, sir.
It was just to provide enough that we could cover
Yes, sir.
whatever that. All right.
All right, then we will vote on the amendment. So we are voting to approve the project in its entirety and pass it on to budget, as Mr. Ring made his motion and Commissioner Rhodes seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
All right, show that it passes. Any abstentions?
Only budgets, only general.
Gen Ops. Did you get that? All right.
Do we get to vote the budget committee when they vote?
No.
Did you, Mr. Hinton, if you want to stay, you're more than welcome, sir.
Do you want me to turn my slide up? Okay, we are now going to, do we move back to budget?
No, but if you want to
Okay.
finish your agenda, please.
Okay, yeah, we're gonna finish the agenda. We're going to old business, capital projects report, should be attached. Is it in there? Nope.
Because of the agenda.
Oh, okay, okay. All right, thank you, Ms. Art. And do you want to go ahead and take, the second two items as well, since you're up there? Thank you.
If you have any questions about the capital projects, but most of them we had kind of been on hold.
We haven't really moved in.
Yeah, if you're in budget and you want to go to the restroom, now's a good time.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Commissioner Taylor?
I just wondered if we skipped public comment.
We're going back to those. That's what Commissioner Taylor said. We're gonna go back to those. Are you okay with that? Yes. We're gonna do those under the budget committee. We're gonna do all comments under the budget. Are you okay with that? Okay.
I'm planning on having the same comments on the two.
Right. Okay. All right, Ms. Ark.
Okay.
Can you ask Chris Taylor out there if he should? Okay, then, yep. Thank you. Okay, Ms. Ark.
Okay, all right. For the roof administration building project, last month y'all approved for us to just negotiate with the contractor to eliminate the shingle portion. So we executed a change order, which reduce the contract by $384,275.62. So our contract now is $467,874.38. So we've completed that change order with the contractor. They started back and forth. They mobilized on site last week. They're working this week with a crane to lift the stairs up to the roof that will connect the two sections. They'll be working on finalizing the cupola painting, and the boiler flue will be delivered, or it was actually delivered on Friday. So it'll take about the rest of this month, and by the first week of October, they'll be complete with the roof project. For the boiler flue, we contract with Urban Template, who is an HVAC consultant, and after last month's meeting, we had him come out and evaluate the boiler, and his recommendation was, in order to not go back through the building like we have and create a safety issue, we are going to temporarily vent the boiler out the basement and then build a chimney up on this first floor portion of the roof. So that will be the way we vent the boiler from now on. He believes that will be much more safe and cost effective than what the architect had proposed prior. We are having to contract with an engineer for the chimney design, just because of the height of it and the heat that comes off of it and everything. But that's $2,630, so it was cheaper than what we would have paid through the other architect. Today we had an electrician move the vent in the basement, so that's the first step to venting the boiler out of the basement. And then we will also have a HVAC company then pipe up the rest of it to the chimney. So I expect that work. We'll have those plans next week from the engineer, and then we'll advertise for bids from there. Because we are temporarily venting out the boiler, it won't cause us to have to shut down or prevent the boiler from being turned on. So it's a.
We feel like it's turned on now.
Yeah. So that's kind of the updates for that. So by next month, I should hopefully have a cost on what the chimney will cost. If there's any other.
Ms. Ark, I just want to say thank you for the committee, and thank you to this committee for staying on top of this issue. Ms. Ark, thank you for your diligence in this and saving the taxpayers a lot of money and figuring out a separate plan of venting it on the outside. So thank you. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And thank you to this committee for recognizing that and taking care of that. All right, new business. We have surplus items from the election office and also from EMS. Motion made to group and approved by Mr. Ring, seconded by Commissioner Tucker. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. One more motion. Thank you. All right, so we will move on to budget, and we will do public comments in budget.
Yep.
Thank you, sir.
Certainly. If you're part of
Gen Ops and would like to
leave, you can.
go see your family, then head on out.